Well, greetings, people of the internet. Unky Joe here, Unky Joe's Playhouse. Today, a story about how not to burn down your damn house. So, what is this device? Well, this is a fuse, boys and girls, and let me show you what it looks like. Look at that. That's not normal. That's not how a fuse should look. It should not look burnt and crusty. And this is what happens when you don't pay attention around electricity. So how did this happen? Fortunately, it blew the fuse, as you can imagine, but not before melting the heck out of it. And what it was a loose cable. It was simply a cable, a nut that I had not tightened down on the positive side of my DC circuit for my 24-volt system that is right behind me. A stupid, simple mistake that could have caused a fire. Could have, worst case scenario, it could have caused a fire. Fortunately, the fuse did its job, and it must have been arcing, because you see the different colorization on this side compared to the other side. So it must have been arcing whenever there was a high current draw coming through that inverter. So today, this is all about how I'm fixing this problem and hopefully preventing it from ever happening again. And I'm going to change from using a fuse like this to protect my battery to using a circuit breaker. Now, that being said, I'm giving everybody fair notice. I am not an electrician. My advice that I give you is based on my experience. I consult with professionals before I do this work. But as far as wire sizing and volts and amps and watts, that's up to you to figure out how to do that. Don't look to me for that advice, because I'm not going to give it to you. Consult with an electrician, though. They're well worth their money if you want to DIY this stuff on your own. But take heed and learn from my mistakes and how not to do your system. And anyway, so let's get on with the video of how we're going to correct this. So right now the system is live, but as you can see, I've just kind of got things, they're just kind of laid out, kind of, just how they are. And the big thing was, this is where the problem was last time. Let's pull this cover off. And you can see where the problem was. Right there. Problem was, I did not have this tightened. So it ended up melting this fuse, and so I got to take all this off. I got to fix all this. And instead of the power coming through a fuse, we're going to go a little bit different, and we're going to run it through this breaker. So this is a 125 amp DC rated breaker, and it also has arc fault or arc extinguishment, which you need on a DC circuit that you don't necessarily need on an AC. So it gives you a little bit added protection. And then initially I thought it was going to fit in that box. It's not. It's going to have to go in that box. So we got to get all this on the wall. We got to get we got to add room for another solar charge controller, because I'm going to put another set of panels on here. So we got to make room for that. We're probably going to have to move the servo up or down. I haven't decided which. And then this bus bar is going to probably need to come up here somewhere. I don't know. We'll see. And then this is a hot mess too, but that's a separate issue. We're gonna get some cable to take care of that, rather than having to run this through conduit and all. We're gonna get some number 6 2 cable, and we'll end up replacing these whips with that 6-2 cable and some grommets, and then we should be good. Because you can run this cable that I'm going to get. It should handle the current load, and you can run it outside a conduit. Whereas with the THHN, you've got to run it inside conduit. So anyway, this will be going bye-bye. Probably this positive and negative bus bar will be going bye-bye. I haven't quite figured that exactly out how I'm going to do that yet, but I'll try to put a camera on this. And any parts that you need to be privy to, I will clue you in on. Alright, so I've turned off the solar panels, one set of panels, and through this breaker I've turned it off. I have turned off the battery. I have turned off the inverter. The servo is still running because it still has power, because it's separate from the battery. So the next thing to do is to go into the main equipment room and turn off the breaker, providing AC power to that unit. And then it'll truly be isolated and I can go to work on it. So this is the 24 volt 3000, comes through this 30 amp breaker. So once I turn that off, we now have no grid power going to that. That goes on this cable up here. And so now we have no power coming over to this inverter at all. No battery power. And I should be able to start deconstructing this mess I have and making some sense out of it. So we'll go ahead and unplug the servo. It doesn't need to have power right now. Everything else should be off. The Victron's off. Now we'll get started putting stuff back on the wall and getting this fuse off. So I thought I'd pause a minute while I'm rewiring this and explain to you what I'm doing. So I've mounted the other MPPT solar charge controller on the wall in addition to this one. And then I moved the Servo GX up, and then I moved, you see I've removed all that stuff that was there, and I moved the bus bar up. All I've done is I've used a number 6 welding wire. I believe this is number 6. No, this is 8 gauge welding wire. Welding wire is more flexible than regular wire. It's finer strands. It's more suited for solar and battery applications. So the way the bus bar works is there's a negative and a positive bus bar. So the negatives all come down here and all screw onto this bottom rail down here, all your negative connections. I'll show you all those in a minute. And then the top is your hot, your positive connection. And that goes through a fuse, and then your positive connection connects there. So everything is fused. So we fuse for our wire. So a number 8 gauge welding wire can handle 40 amps. It's not going to cause it any problems. So we should be safe to go ahead, and you see it, even though I'm using a black wire, I wrapped it with red heat shrink, so we know that that's the positive side. It goes to the positive side where it says battery. So what I'm going to do now is, once you get the negative on, and make sure you tighten your connections, and if you need to, mark them with the little marks a lot to let people know, hey, I've checked this, it's good. Okay, so there you go. So now we get a little mark on it. All right, so now what I can do is put this little cover on that. So now I got it on there. So you see how that covers the negative and keeps the positive wire, which is going to lay right here, right there, lays on that part. And then there's a cover that covers all this up. So positive goes through the fuse and then to the solar charge controller right here. Alright, so we've pretty much got the DC system all wired up. We'll come back and we'll cover that here in a minute. But the more important thing is I've got the shunt. You can see I've marked that with black tape to let people know it's a negative connection. Positive, negative, they go down through a breaker. This is a master shut off. And then there'll be two cables coming out of the bottom here. They go down to the batteries sitting down there. But my next important part, or phase, hi, sweetie. She's not happy because Daddy's making noise. So I just let her run around. So you can see I got a hot mess here. So anyway, those two Redodo batteries on the rack here need to be disconnected safely. Then once they're disconnected, they need to be moved out of this holder. And then they need to be transferred into the other room. And then I can put this battery here back against the wall the other way. So yeah, this ought to be fun. So I get to get those two Redodos out of here because they belong with my 24-volt system. And then I can do the changes that I have coming in this room. So wish me luck, folks. Hope I don't get electrocuted. Alright, so we've got the battery cables hooked up. I decided to forego the box for reasons I'll discuss at the end of the video, but for now we have a breaker here. It's a 125 amp breaker, and remember, you protect the wire, not the circuit that's behind the wire. So make sure your breaker is properly sized for the wire you're using. Mine's too big. I've ordered a smaller breaker. It'll be here tomorrow, but for today I wanted to put this into service. So I powered it on, and that means I've got blinking lights. That means I've got everything hooked up right. Let's see here, the smart solar charge controller, it is up and running, but I don't have the panels turned on. They're shut off down there. The batteries are all wired in parallel now, so I get one single 25 volt or 24 volt battery, 400 amp hour capacity. And yeah, let's go turn on the main power. So we're going to turn on the grid feed to this inverter. So let's go do that now. I have a breaker, a lonely 30 amp breaker. You see it's 24 3000, and that's this breaker. It's 30 amp. Flip that on. That sends power up over that wire. That's a service entrance cable. That's why it's not in conduit. And it comes over to, well, it comes over to this gray box. Hang on a second. I'm trying to get the best view here. I'm out of breath. I'm tired. I'm an old man. So it comes over to here. That power does. It gets converted from aluminum to copper cable because the Victron does not support aluminum wire. It goes up into the AC inside. And then AC out comes to here. This is a distribution breaker panel. I have a 20 amp breaker to give me power here, and a 20 amp feeder to give me power to this feeder circuit. Alright, so I think we're ready to turn on the inverter. I need to put a cover on this. I've got one. I'll put a cover on that in a minute, but I want to test and make sure we're working first. So I'm going to flip the switch on the inverter. That should power it on. It should see that we have mains power. Takes it a minute here. We'll hear a big ka-thunk. There we go. That means it's flipped it over now. So now the mains is providing power. It's actually it's passing the power through, I should say. So now I should be able to turn on these two circuit breakers, and I should now be able to turn on my dishwasher. But baby steps. First I want to see everything's working. So let's go over the computer and see if everything's working. Alright, so we got the power back on. As you can see, the 24 volt system is back up and running. I've already gone into I'm not going to bore you with the details of going into the Victron software. It's rather complicated. If you're interested in that, I could do a whole video on how I program my Victron system, but that's not what this video is about. This video is about wiring my batteries up properly and making sure everything is, tightened down so we don't have another incident with the fuse like we did a couple of weeks ago. And as you can see, we've got about 460 watts coming in from the grid. I got about a 600 watt load. It's jumping up and down because I've currently got the dishwasher on. So the this circuit, this 24 volt circuit, powers the rack and the desk behind me and the dishwasher, and that's it. That's all it's responsible for. But that dishwasher, when the heating element comes on, can go up to 1,500 watts. It's pulling through this 24 volt system, and that's what caused my the fuse connector to melt earlier, because I didn't tighten down the connection properly, and then heating and cooling and heating and cooling, that wire heats up, and yeah, so thank goodness for fuses, right? It is wired properly now. Got a breaker in there, and I've upped the size of the wire even though I didn't have to. I went ahead and did that anyway. I had the cable, I had the number 2 wire laying around, so why not use it? Better safe than sorry. And then, so right now the batteries are fully charged. All 4 batteries were balanced before I put them together in parallel. I could have just charged them together in parallel and they would have top balanced just fine. The BMS in each battery takes care of balancing each battery once you get them to the voltage you want them to be at, your 100% voltage. So anyway, now it's running. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and flip over ESS mode to use right now I've got to keep the batteries charged, but I want to use optimize with battery life. So what that'll then do is, based on the amount of current being taken or coming in from the solar, right now it's 700 watts, depending on that and how much the load is, will determine whether it's going to draw any current from the battery. You can see it's adjusting now. It's pulling in about 585, 600 watts from solar. The battery is making up for what the solar can't keep up with. And then in the worst case, last case scenario, the grid will pull in power as it needs to keep the load powered. But what this will do is it'll monitor the battery, and it'll draw from the battery if needed, but it won't let the battery get less than 80% capacity. And that's just a way to kind of preserve the battery just in case you have a critical event happen. You can also set this up to be optimized without battery life, and that'll take the battery down to 20%. And then you can see here I have it limited to using the grid to charging the battery at 30 amps. So I could, in theory, go up to 50 or 100 amps, but I don't think I can with this Multi Plus 2, this 24 volt unit. But here it is. It's up and running. Again, it just took a lot of time. It's taken me 2 days to get this thing rewired. Well, 3-hour days. So, so 6 hours total to get this all rewired. I had to stop and, have dinner and whatnot, take care of family things. But here we are. Proof is in the pudding. It's up and running. And excuse me, my voice is, I'm losing my voice. So just like the 48 volt system, the 24 volt system, everything originates here at the main panel. So I have 200 amp service coming in, and then what I've done is this circuit here marked furnace is actually the pass-through, is the live feed, or is the grid feed to my 48 volt inverters and to my 24 volt inverters. So this is how they get power. Power comes out of that 60 amp breaker into this large service entrance cable. Now this service entrance cable is capable of handling 100 amps at 240 volts. And it also has a ground wire in it. And this goes over to the equipment room. So the main power for the grid feeds in through the floor here, comes up this large service entrance cable right here, capable of 100 amps. I wanted plenty of ability to grow my system. So this wire, even though I'm only pulling about 50 amps, 30 to 50 amps through here, I sized it for 100 amps. So that feeds in here via a 60 amp breaker from my main panel. So this is where the grid power comes in for the EG4, which is a 240 volt inverter. That's at 40 amp feed is right there. Then for the 24 volt 3000 VA inverter from Victron, power is 30 amp breaker, and that goes up through this cable here, which then goes along the top of the equipment closet room. And then that wire feeds down the wall, providing grid power to this box, 120 volts at 30 amps. And then the wire is converted from aluminum to copper inside this box. And then number 6 copper wire is run up to the Victron, because the Victron will not accept aluminum wiring. So I wired that up through there. That's the grid coming in. And then the power going out comes out on this side, comes down into this box here. And then there is a breaker here, a 20 amp breaker that feeds the circuit on the other side of the house. And it feeds this plug here, a 20 amp plug here. And you can see we got the 20 amp receptacles. This one feeds over to the pool pump and to the dishwasher, to the sub panel over there. I just went ahead and put a breaker in there. It just made it easier to wire things. And then that takes this from copper back to aluminum, and then that wire, that service entrance cable, the gray one, goes down under the house, and then through the miracle of science and this service entrance cable here, which is capable of handling about 50 amps at 240 volts, that feeds this panel, so feeder from the Victron 24 volt. And on this circuit I have 2 breakers, one for the dishwasher and one for the pool pump. And right now the pool pump is off and the dishwasher is on. So the power comes from that 24 volt inverter, solar power or grid, gets passed through from the Victron to this circuit panel and feeds the dishwasher and the pool circuit. So the batteries are now stacked here. I've got 4 of the Redodo 24 volt 100 amp hour batteries. There's 4 of them stacked. They're wired in parallel. And then those cables come up here. They're now secured and wire tied, just to keep them from moving, so they can't move anywhere. They go up to the bottom of this 100 amp breaker, 125 amp breaker. And this is a DC breaker, it's green. And it also has arc fault, not arc fault protection, but arc suppression, because anytime you break a DC circuit and there's a lot of current flowing, there could be an arc that jumps across. So this takes care of that and makes sure it's extinguished. The negative then comes up to the shunt, and then that feeds the negative into the Victron bus bar. And then the positive comes up and feeds into the positive side of the Victron bus bar. And then from there, DC power is distributed to and from the charge controllers up here on this wire. And these are for the solar panels, these smaller wires here. One marked PV, one marked battery. There's the servo that controls it. I have a separate charge controller for another set of panels. Again, the links power in. Everything is now tied up and secured. This wire goes down to a breaker for the solar panels so I can turn them on or off. And then the rest, well, you've seen already. And then all the power from my rack and everything goes through that white plug here and down to an extension cord to this UPS right here. A battery backup. I have another UPS to go inside the rack, but I haven't ordered I just ordered the batteries for it, waiting for them to come in, and then I'm going to put it in here. But in the meantime, that's the UPS that runs everything here on the rack and on the bench, which is a mess. Hey, I'm working. Give me a break. So everything went well. It took me a couple of days, and I've spent probably 6-8 hours on this project. Now, in addition to getting my 24 volt system squared away, I was able to take those 24 volt batteries out of that I had wired in series for my 48 volt system and put them here on the 24 volt system where they belong. And then I had recently purchased a couple of 48 volt batteries. I'll do a separate video on that. And I was able to put them into the equipment room behind me with the help of my wonderful spouse, because those batteries weigh about $1.25 each. And we were able to get it into a makeshift rack and get them hooked up. So I'll do another follow-up video on that. But, you know, thank God for fuses, and for, you know, because people make mistakes, and I'm just as guilty as the next person. But now I have a checklist. So before I can complete any electrical work, I get my spouse to come in here with me, and we double check every single connection. And then we have a little list that we sign our little initials on. And until that is signed by both of us, I can't flip the electricity on. So it's just good idea to do that, right? Nothing wrong with a little bit of backup. Now, a lot of people question my sanity, and that's okay. I do that as well sometimes. Why I'm using a 24 volt system for my rack and whatnot. Well, because one, I had the 24 volt gear. I didn't want to take all that gear and try to put it on the eBays and there and try to get money out of it. And it's actually perfectly suited to run like my rack and my studio desk back behind me, and things occasionally like the dishwasher. You know, it's just geared to that. It's not as efficient as a 48 volt system, but that's okay because I have a plethora of panels. So why not put this 24 volt inverter to work, and all the money I have invested into 24 volt batteries? It just seemed like a no-brainer to put the system back to work. So that's why I did what I did. And it allows me to keep my my business assets separate from the rest of the house, so that if I need to do some maintenance on my rack or whatever, it isn't going to affect the electricity in the house. So anyway, we hope you found the video entertaining and informative. As always, please give us a thumbs up down below if you liked the video. Hey, do me a favor. Some of you watch my video from beginning to end, and for that I'm truly thankful. But what really kills the algorithm is when you watch 5 or 10 minutes of the video and then click away. So can you do me a favor? Even if you're not going to watch the video, it would really help with engagement if you would just let the video run in the background. If you're not going to watch it and pay attention to it, it won't hurt my feelings. But what it'll do is it'll tell YouTube people are watching this video, and it'll recommend it to more people. So anyway, thanks again for coming to see us. Subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. Let's see. Donate if you're so inclined. PayPal, Patreon, YouTube, join function. You know the rigmarole. And don't forget, we'll see all of you on the other side.
I've been watching old Unky Joe. From Texas heat to where the cacti grow. Fixing server solar power in the land, hoping that his plans all stand. Making life a touch more bright underneath those sun